The first crack in my marriage arrived in a white box with a silver logo on it. It was a Thursday afternoon, raining hard enough to turn the stone paths in our neighborhood slick and black. And I was home between calls, half listening to an analyst brief while signing for a package I wasn't expecting. The courier held out the scanner. I scribbled my name, and only when I brought the box inside did I notice it wasn't addressed to me. It was addressed to my wife, Allison Roberts, and beneath her name, in thin embossed letters, was the logo of a place I had never heard her mention. The Halcyon Club. I turned the box once in my hands. It was heavier than it looked. Elegant, expensive, the kind of packaging built to make the person opening it feel chosen. When I cut the tape and lifted the lid, I found black tissue paper, a cream envelope, and beneath it, a matte metal key card engraved with her initials. AR. There was also a welcome note. We're delighted to have you joining our private circle. Your access begins immediately. We know you'll find exactly what you've been missing. I read that line twice, not because it sounded romantic, because it sounded personal. That's the thing about working in intelligence. You stop hearing words the way normal people hear them. You hear subtext. You hear what a sentence assumes. You hear the hidden sender, even when the signature is clean. When Allison got home that evening, she found me in the kitchen with the box on the counter between us. She barely blinked. "Oh," she said, setting down her tote bag. "That came already?" I watched her face. "What is it, a new club?" "What kind of club?" She shrugged, too casually. "Wellness, social, networking. A few women in the neighborhood joined. Pilates classes, private gym, wine tastings, that kind of thing." That answer landed too quickly. "And you didn't mention it?" She gave me a little smile, the sort she used when she wanted to make my question sound heavier than it was. "I was going to. It just came together fast." Then she picked up the black key card, slid it back into the envelope, and walked upstairs like the matter was too small to deserve another minute. I stood in the kitchen listening to the rain on the windows and tried to decide whether I was reacting like a husband or like the man I used to be. Before my current job in private intelligence, I was something a lot uglier and a lot more useful. I used to break into systems for money. Not banks, not governments, mostly corporations, private contractors, people with too much arrogance and not enough security. Some of it was legal. Some of it lived in gray territory. Some of it would sound a lot less glamorous if I called it what it really was. Knowing where people hid things and how to get to them before they knew they were exposed. That part of my life ended before I met Allison. I buried it under better suits, legal work, and the sort of quiet discipline that makes dangerous men look employable. When people asked what I did now, I told them I worked in intelligence, which was true. Corporate investigations, risk analysis, behavioral patterns, internal vulnerabilities, elegant language for watching people lie, and deciding which lies would cost the most. What I had never been able to do, even with all that training, was use that lens on my own marriage. Allison and I had been together 8 years. From the outside, we looked solid in the way upper-middle-class marriages are supposed to look solid. Not passionate exactly. Passion makes neighbors nervous. We looked composed, independent, busy, the kind of couple who lived in a private community with trimmed hedges and tasteful lighting, and separate calendars that somehow still synced. She had her classes, charity things, women's events, the occasional club dinner or wine night. I had my work, my office, my late calls with clients in other time zones, my habit of noticing things I did not always say out loud. We weren't inseparable. We weren't supposed to be. We had built a life on the idea that mature love looked like two capable adults moving in parallel, not one fused identity. That had once felt healthy, modern, clean, but somewhere over the last year, the distance between our separate lives stopped feeling elegant and started feeling useful. Useful to her, the Halcyon Club changed the rhythm first. At the beginning, Allison only mentioned it lightly. "A class here, a ladies' mixer there, a private fitness session. You'd hate it," she said once, laughing while checking lipstick in the hall mirror. "It's all yoga voices and women pretending sparkling water is exciting." Then she started going 3 nights a week. Then 4, then afternoons too. It became the reason dinner got pushed, the reason she missed Sunday visits with my sister, the reason she skipped a neighbor's anniversary party she'd RSVP'd to weeks earlier, the reason she began dressing differently even for errands. Cleaner lines, softer makeup, a specific perfume I had never bought her and certainly had never smelled in our house before. Her phone changed with her, face down on counters, muted in the evenings, always within reach. The passcode changed, the cloud sync turned off. Once, around midnight, I woke up and found the blue wash of her screen lighting the ceiling while she lay on her side, pretending to be asleep when I shifted. I didn't say anything then. I told myself what decent men tell themselves when they don't want to become suspicious husbands. She's entitled to privacy. She wants her own life. Not every change is betrayal. Don't let old instincts poison what's still good. But the problem with old instincts is that they usually turn out to be old for a reason. A week after the package arrived, I noticed the first financial anomaly. It was small, too small probably, for most husbands to catch at all. A transfer from our joint account to a digital bank I didn't recognize. $400, labeled only with a string of alphanumeric characters, and a transaction tag that looked like a test deposit chain. I almost ignored it. Then I saw a second one 2 days later. Then a third. The amounts were inconsistent enough to look harmless. 300, 625, 250, always moved quietly, always timed close to a halcyon day. I said nothing. I started watching. There are two versions of suspicion. The loud kind makes accusations. The smart kind builds folders. I built folders. A timeline first. When did the club start? How often did she go? How often did she come home late afterward? What other things had shifted at the same time? Then I widened it. Shared card statements. Location history, still cached on an old home tablet she thought we weren't using. Wi-Fi associations from her devices, leaving and returning to our home network. Calendar gaps, parking invoices, deleted app icons reappearing after updates. The picture sharpened slowly, then all at once. The Halcyon Club was real. That was almost the cruelest part. It was not some fake address or invented cover story. It existed exactly where she said it did. Inside a renovated stone building near the lake at the edge of our community. Behind privacy hedges and black iron gates, marketed as a luxury wellness and social club for select members. But it had other uses too. Late valet receipts, after-hours lounge charges, private suite reservations listed as hospitality hold. A wine storage locker rented under a different member name, but tied to a card I knew was hers. And then there was the hidden bank account. I didn't hack it. I didn't need to. Allison made the classic mistake of opening it with her maiden name initials, while still funding it through our household life. Tiny transfers at first, then larger ones once she relaxed. The account wasn't there to hide everyday spending. It was there to build a second financial stream. Something separate, something protected, something that didn't include me. That was when the betrayal stopped being hypothetical. Not because I had seen another man, because I had seen intent. Affairs can be weakness. A hidden bank account is planning. The first time I got a name, it came from a florist receipt. Delivered to the club. White orchids. Private lounge. From Ted. No last name. Just Ted. I sat at my desk staring at that name until my eyes started to blur. And a memory surfaced from 3 months earlier. Allison at a neighborhood charity event, laughing too long at something a dark-haired man in a navy jacket had said. Her hand resting on his forearm just a second past politeness. At the time, I had filed it under social ease. Now it came back sharper. Ted Cross, one of the private club partners, former hospitality executive, popular in the neighborhood in exactly the way certain men become popular. Expensive smile, good shoulders, easy voice, and the kind of confidence women call warmth because that sounds safer. I did what I used to do best. I looked, not publicly, quietly. He had gone through a fast divorce 2 years earlier. No children, quiet legal dispute over a property transfer, a shell company tied to a small real estate holding group, a personal style built to signal success without ever looking like he was trying. He was the sort of man who could make a room feel special simply by entering it slower than everyone else. The sort of man women mistake for depth, when what they really mean is composure. I hated him immediately, not because of what he looked like, because I could already see the architecture of what had happened. Allison had not simply joined a club. She had joined a new world, one where I was no longer central, one where someone like Ted became the version of male attention she wanted to be seen inside. The package had not been a membership welcome. It had been an invitation into a second life. The thing that hurt most at first was not the sex I imagined. It was the priority, the way the club moved ahead of everything else. Ahead of us, ahead of family, ahead of small obligations that had once held our life together. If she had just cheated, maybe I could have named it and left, but she was reorganizing herself around it. That is harder to survive. The first real confrontation nearly happened in our laundry room. I was folding towels. She came in flushed from one of her late movement classes, phone in hand, and I caught the scent of expensive cedar cologne under her perfume. I looked at her, she looked at me, and for a second something in her face said she knew that I knew at least enough to frighten her. Then she smiled. Tough day? I wanted to throw the towels at the wall. Instead I said, how's the club? Her expression didn't move. Fine, worth all the time? A pause. Then she turned away to pretend to sort whites from darks. It's mine, Brett. I'm allowed to have something that's mine. That sentence should sound harmless, maybe even healthy, but in marriages, tone is content. What she meant was not that she needed independence. What she meant was that the new part of her life existed beyond my reach, and she had already decided I wasn't entitled to its truth. That night I couldn't sleep, so I did one thing I had promised myself years ago I would never do to a woman I loved. I used what I knew. Not malware, not some cartoon version of hacking where green code scrolls across a screen, and the hero becomes a criminal. because the plot needs him to be brilliant. Just recovered fragments, old paired device logs, auto-saved cloud items left exposed by app collisions, metadata from photos deleted on her phone, but not stripped from connected storage. Reservation notices, valet timestamps, fragments of chat notifications. You don't need to read every message to know the shape of a betrayal. Sometimes all you need is pattern density. They had been meeting for at least 6 months. Private lounge, suite level, member cellar, a lakeside cabana package. The club rented out only to preferred guests. He called her Allie. That alone made me close the laptop and walk into the kitchen to breathe. Because pet names are worse than hotel rooms. Hotel rooms are logistics. Pet names mean repetition. I kept digging. Then I found the second, deeper betrayal. Not only had she opened a hidden bank account, she had been moving money towards something else. A deposit ledger, an attorney consultation, a document fee, a storage unit near the club district, and then one note attached to an internal transfer memo she thought she had deleted. Move the rest after Brett signs. After Brett signs what? That question hollowed me out. For the next 4 days, I lived like a man standing under a ceiling he knew was cracked, but couldn't yet see the break line. I smiled at neighbors, took calls, made dinner twice, kissed my wife once on the cheek while she searched her tote bag for a lipstick she had lost. Listened to her talk about a club wellness retreat while wondering whether she was setting me up for a separation agreement, a property move, or something uglier. Then the answer arrived by accident. A delivered envelope, wrongly placed in my office stack, because the courier assumed all mail in the house belonged to me. Attorney letterhead, family law, draft financial disclosure checklist. Not filed, not signed, but started. And on the back page in Allison's handwriting, a list. Club account, storage unit, cousin can hold jewelry, move statement copies, get him to agree calmly. I sat there a long time with that page in my hand. That was the moment I realized I was not just being betrayed. I was being managed. She wasn't waiting to decide whether to leave. She was preparing the story, the money, the documents, the tone. She wanted me cooperative, predictable, easy, which meant she still underestimated the only part of me I had spent years burying. I stopped grieving and started planning. The first person I called was not a lawyer. It was her cousin, Mara. If you want to understand how ugly what happened next became, you have to understand Mara before you judge me for it. Mara wasn't one of those cousins Allison saw only at weddings and funerals. She was woven into our life, close enough to drop by unannounced, pretty in an easier, warmer way than Allison. Quieter, sharper, the kind of woman who could look at a dinner table and instantly know who was lying to keep the peace. She had always liked me, not flirtatiously, not then, just in the way some people do, when they think you are more alone than your marriage allows you to admit. I called her under the excuse of asking about a charity invite I knew she'd mentioned last month. We talked, then talked longer. Then she asked gently, "What's really going on?" I almost lied. Instead, I said, "I think your cousin is having an affair." There was silence on the line. Not shocked silence, confirmation silence. That hurt worse than anything I'd found so far. "You knew," I said. "I knew something was wrong," she answered. "Not everything, but enough." A pause. Yes, that should have been the moment I hung up on both of them forever. Instead, it became the first step toward my own collapse. Mara met me for coffee the next day. We sat in the back corner of a place near the lake, and she told me what she had seen over the last few months. The way Allison had changed, the club obsession, the private little smiles at her phone, the distance, the coldness, the quiet superiority. She admitted she'd seen Allison with Ted once outside the club after hours. Too close, too familiar, too comfortable for plausible innocence. She told me it was complicated, Mara said. I laughed. They always do. She looked at me then with an expression so open it made me angry. "Brett, I'm sorry." No one else had said that. Not really. Not in a way that made room for the damage. Instead of racing toward explanation. That was where it started. Not in a bedroom, not with revenge already in my hand. With relief, with being seen, with someone close to the fire admitting it was hot. The confrontation at the club came a week later. By then I had copied everything, secured our major accounts, pulled my half of the liquid funds into protected structures, printed the draft disclosure list, saved the club records, backed up the transfer history and the reservation trail, and arranged, through counsel, for service papers to be ready the moment I decided I was done pretending. I drove to Halcyon just after 8 on a Friday. The lot in front looked innocent enough. Luxury SUVs, subtle lighting, women in activewear, men in soft cashmere who wanted the world to know they had leisure without ever calling it wealth. But I didn't park out front. I went around back, past the Lake Drive, where the staff entrance opened toward the private suites and the member cabanas. That was where Allison's car was, not in the main lot, not by the fitness wing, around the rear service curve, where people parked when they didn't want timing questions. The back hallway smelled like eucalyptus, citrus cleaner, and expensive air. I walked it calmly, carrying enough certainty by then that I no longer felt adrenaline so much as focus. Suite 3B was half open. I didn't have to knock. Allison was standing near the bar counter in a silk blouse I had never seen before, barefoot, one heel dangling from her fingers, laughing at something Ted had just said. He was close enough that I could see his hand, still resting against the small of her back, when I stepped into the doorway. Neither of them moved at first. That was my favorite part of the whole ugly story. The instant before panic, the instant where the secret world still believes itself intact, because it cannot imagine the wronged person arriving fully awake. Allison turned first. Her face didn't just go pale. It emptied. Ted removed his hand slowly, as though good posture might save him from disgrace. I looked at him, then at her, then around the suite. 2 wine glasses, her bag on the sofa, his jacket on a chair, a stack of property brochures on the table, one folder with the logo of the same family law firm, whose draft disclosure packet I had found in my office. I smiled then, which seemed to disturb both of them more than yelling would have. "So this is the club?" No one answered. I walked in fully and picked up the brochure on the table. It wasn't for the club. It was for a townhouse development across the lake. Small but private. Luxury units. Easy buy-in through partnership financing. That was what she'd been moving money toward. Not just escape. Replacement. A whole new setting for the life she had already started narrating without me. Allison set her heel down. "It's not what you think." I looked at her. "You opened a hidden bank account, moved household money into it, started legal prep without telling me, and planned a housing move with the man you've been sleeping with. I'm honestly curious what part you think I'm missing." That line landed hard enough that even Ted looked away. Then came what I had expected. Not remorse, counterattack. Her chin lifted, her eyes hardened. The version of her that had spent months preloading a story stepped forward. "You were never really here," she said. "You sat in that office and monitored the world and called it being a husband. You noticed systems, Brett, not people. I've been lonely for years." It was almost elegant, almost persuasive. Maybe it would have worked if I had walked in blind. Instead, I reached into my jacket, took out the folded disclosure list from her law firm and placed it on the bar. Then the hidden account summary, then the transfer sheet, then the suite charges, then the note in her handwriting. Get him to agree calmly. I looked at Ted. You should know she was planning your future with money she was still siphoning out of mine. For the first time, he looked rattled. Allison moved toward the papers, but I was faster. "Don't," I said. That was the first command I had given her in years, and the sound of it changed the room. She stopped. I let the silence stretch. Then I said the line I had been carrying for days. "You didn't betray me because you fell in love with someone else. You betrayed me because you thought I'd stay manageable while you built my replacement." That hit her. Not the affair, not the account. That sentence, because it named the part she was most ashamed of and most unwilling to admit. Ted tried to step in then. Something about adults, messy marriages, and things not always being black and white. I turned to him and said, "You built your whole life around being the kind of man women mistake for rescue. Don't insult me by pretending you wandered into this." He said nothing after that. The legal service came 2 days later. Public enough to feel humiliating. Private enough not to become neighborhood theater. I thought that would be the end of the emotional damage. It was, because once the marriage cracked open, Mara stayed close. Too close. She checked on me, brought food, helped me move boxes into storage, listened without defending Allison, stayed late one night after wine and quiet, and too much truth had made the room feel smaller than it was. I crossed the line first. I'll own that. Not because I was in love with Myra, not because she was some secret soulmate, because betrayal changes your moral temperature if you let it. And I let it. What started as comfort became contact. What became contact turned into an affair built from pain, proximity, and the dark thrill of violating the same family system that had failed to protect me. If you want me to pretend it was noble, I won't. It was revenge wearing tenderness long enough to confuse both of us. Allison found out 3 months after the divorce filing, and the look on her face when the truth landed told me everything I needed to know about human hypocrisy. She could live inside her own hidden life. She could build a second future. She could hide money, lies, rooms, and intentions. But the moment she realized I had crossed the line with her cousin, something primal and personal woke up in her that no legal filing had touched. She came to the house unannounced that afternoon. Eyes red, phone shaking in her hand with screenshots Mara had finally admitted were real. "You did this to hurt me." There was no point denying it. Yes, the honesty stunned her more than the affair. For a second, she just stared. Then she said, "How could you?" And I laughed. Not loudly, not cruelly, just with the exhausted disbelief of a man who had been asked a question too insulting to answer. "You really want to ask me that?" she cried then, harder than she had at the confrontation, harder than she had when the lawyer served her, harder than she had when I sold the wedding silver and closed the joint account. Because this was the first betrayal she understood not just as event, but as invasion. That was my darkest moment, not sleeping with Myra, enjoying Allison's pain when she understood. If I'm honest, that's the part of the story I'm least proud of. The rest of the fallout was exactly what you'd expect, and somehow uglier. Ted vanished into another market within 6 months. Suddenly, consulting in Miami after the club partnership quietly bought him out. Men like him rarely fall hard. They just relocate their charm before the old room finishes burning. The club kept operating, but its shine changed for me forever. Every time I drove past those gates, I saw not wellness or privilege but staging. A set built for people who wanted to practice becoming someone else before officially leaving who they'd been. Allison lost the house she thought she'd transition out of gracefully. Lost the financial cushion she'd been building. Lost Myra too, at least for a while. Lost the right to tell the story in a way that preserved her innocence. And me. I lost the clean version of myself. That matters. People love revenge stories because they imagine the wronged person gets sharpened into justice, while the betrayer gets dissolved into consequence. Real life doesn't work that way. What really happens is messier. You survive, you learned, you protect what's left, and if you're not careful, you become intimate with parts of yourself you would have once judged in other men. In the end, I lost my marriage, the version of my wife I had protected for 8 years, and the comforting belief that intelligence makes betrayal easier to survive. It doesn't. It just lets you watch the structure collapse in higher definition. The last thing I remember clearly from that whole season is Allison standing in my driveway at dusk, wind moving her hair, mascara gone soft under her eyes, realizing all at once that her affair had not just cost her a husband. It had cost her control, because while she was busy replacing me in secret, she had turned me into someone capable of replacing her in a way she never thought I would dare. That was the ending. Not noble, not clean, not even especially wise. Just true, and sometimes truth is the ugliest thing left standing.